Hello, I'm the moderator, so I get no podium and take no side. Although I said I'd be willing to debate either side of this very interesting proposition. I'm a political journalist by background. I get to have it both ways because I get to express my political opinion whenever I want. But when people ask me to donate money to political campaigns, I say I can't. It violates journalistic ethics, which it does. But I recognize that people in business don't have that luxury. And particularly with startup companies, young companies, this debate has been heard everywhere since the campaign, and particularly since Donald Trump was elected president. What are the responsibilities and obligations even for people who are leaders at tech companies when it comes to politics? And I know the same kinds of debates are taking place in Europe around questions ranging from Catalonian secession to Brexit. Anyway, we have two terrific people to debate our motion here today. It's phrased as a negative. The proposition is that tech leaders shouldn't share their political views. So if you a vote in favor of that proposition means keep your mouth shut at least most of the time. A vote against means you think tech leaders should get involved. And I wanted just to set the baseline here, ask you before hearing the debate, what do you think? Who here agrees with the proposition that tech leaders should not share their political views? Put up your hands, make a little noise. I see a smattering of hands. I hear one person clapping in the third row. All right, and who here thinks that tech leaders should share their political views? Hands, more hands. Okay, so Amy, you're going to start, and you've got to persuade people because most of them are not starting out on your side. And just briefly introduce yourself a little more, if you would.
I am Amy Pressman. I am the co-founder and president of Medallia. We are an enterprise software company in the customer experience management space. We were named number 7 in 2017 on Forbes' top private company list. And it's good to see I have so many in the audience with me. Look, this topic is actually pretty near and dear to me because before I went to business school and entered business, I actually worked on Capitol Hill. So I believe deeply in the importance of our democracy and in politics, and certainly in Silicon Valley and beyond, you see a lot more CEOs taking political stands. You have Howard Schultz at Starbucks, you have Benioff, you have Tim Cook at Apple, but I am still going to argue that it is not proper for tech leaders to take a political stand. And I want to define that pretty narrowly, because here's the reality. Businesses operate in political environments. All companies have to deal with trade policies, tax policy, employment law, immigration law. So there's no way as a leader of a company that you can that you can avoid being engaged politically. So what I mean when I say we should not take a stand politically is you should not share your personal views, your clearly partisan views that don't directly relate to the interests of the company. And just in terms of, I think while all companies have to deal with politics, I think this is even more so in Silicon Valley. So you have new companies creating new industries where the legal and regulatory frameworks are either nascent or rapidly evolving. You have some companies that are trying to dislodge existing industries where they need to help rewrite and reshape a regulatory framework. A great example of that would be Uber or Airbnb. And then you have some startup companies where how decisions get made about net neutrality and data privacy can, make or break their company. So politics is particularly important to tech companies, but I still believe that leaders should keep their personal views to themselves, and here's why. I think that this is ultimately about leadership, and good leadership means being a steward of your company and putting the interests of that company first, your customers, your employees, your shareholders. And when you introduce your personal political views, then I think you're introducing your personal interests and essentially undermining your leadership. And I think some of the things that can happen when you do that, first of all, you can alienate customers. There's evidence that when a CEO takes a political stand, you tend, the people who are against you are going to be much more vocal, and they're going to be much more long-standing in their lack of support for you than those that support you. So I read a recent study where while 40% of people would buy more from a company whose CEO they agreed with on hot-button issues, 45% would buy less or not buy at all from a company where they disagreed with the CEO. And a recent example is when the founder of Chick-fil-A openly opposed gay marriage. You had the supporters doing a, support Chick-fil-A for a day kind of effort. In the meantime, the detractors were boycotting for a sustained period of time. So you risk alienating customers. I think, to me, even more important, you risk alienating your employees or causing misalignment. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley. It's a fairly progressive place. And yet there are people throughout our company voted for all the different candidates in the most recent political campaign, both in the primaries and in the final election. And when I make political statements that clearly would align me or my co-founder clearly align us with one candidate or another, then we're essentially we're making an environment where some people are going to feel unwanted. I think people are going to feel unable or unwilling to share their views. There was actually a study I read about in HBR recently where when a CEO makes campaign contributions, the employees are 3 times more likely to contribute to that candidate. And that if the CEO were to shift their allegiance, the employees would as well. So it really hurts employees' willingness to have contrarian views. And I think most importantly, it's basically sending a signal that the leader is willing to elevate their personal positions above the alignment of the organization. And that's a signal to allow employees to do that too, which creates misalignment, and ultimately I think undermines leadership. And I also think that I don't know that there's...
Your time is just about up, Amy. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to turn it over to Justin. You'll get another chance, but you've put the proposition to him very directly. How can a CEO who represents people who work for him with various political views take a political view and not have it seem like the view of the company?
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Amy. First of all, my name is Justin Antonipillai. I came here last year as a political appointee in the Obama administration, and now I run a software startup that focuses on data privacy and data protection. So let me just say, I know everybody here is for Startup University. I am really rooting for everybody in this room, and I hope you're rooting for me. First of all, I think this is a great question, and let me tell you why. I think David Chappelle was right. I know a lot of people who will tell me the most personal details of their life. I can talk to them about their annual physical. They will even tell me about their proctological exams. But if I bring up, hey, who'd you vote for in the last elections? Whoa, Justin. That is way too personal. So there's no doubt when it comes to talking politics, you can offend really, really easily. But I'll tell you 3 reasons why, as a CEO, and certainly the CEO of a startup, you should absolutely share your political views. The first one is, it's sort of taken as true that you should never, if you go to a dinner party, you should never talk about politics, religion, and money. I think that's been talked into us for generations. But the truth is, if you've ever gone to a dinner party where you don't talk about religion, politics, or money, it's the most boring dinner party you have ever gone to. And to be honest, nobody wants to work at the most boring dinner party you've ever gone to. So number 1, let's just be interesting and run an interesting company and take some risks. Second, as a CEO, honestly, a lot of what I do is driven by trust. My team has to trust me, my investors have to trust me, my customers have to trust me. And to be honest, I don't think you can trust somebody that you do not know. And I know we've gotten to the point where you have to be super careful about what you say in public and how you say it, but you got to take some risks. You got to share something about yourself. And in an era around the current political systems, sharing just a little bit about your political views is a critical element of building trust in your enterprise. And the third reason I would say, I will tell a very brief story. When my daughter, who's a bit of a firecracker, was 3 years old, she would offend little kids regularly. She's a very sweet kid, by the way, but she would fire other kids up. And we would send her in and say, hey, you got to apologize. And what she would do is she would walk up to kids to about an inch or a centimeter from their face, stand perfectly still, and scream, apologize, right in their face. And we had to explain to them that it's not just that you're doing it, it's how you do it. So my third point is, there is no doubt that you ought to share your political views. It's how you do it. And you got to do it in a way that's respectful, and most importantly, gives everybody else in your company, your customers, your investors, room to disagree.
So Amy, Justin says it's just natural to talk about politics. It's what people do. It's artificial to try to hold back. And as an example, he might have used America's most admired CEO, Warren Buffett, who's taken open political positions. We even have something called the Buffett Rule, which comes from his political intervention that it was wrong for his secretary to pay a higher tax rate than he did. Why isn't that the natural and reasonable way for a CEO to respond to something that he feels is a political and a moral issue?
So I do think that CEOs can respond to things that are political when they are related to the business. So potentially in the Buffett case, he thinks that the tax law needs reforming, and he has an example how it's impacting his business. Personal example for us is when Trump issued the executive order banning immigration from 7 Muslim-majority countries. We had a bunch of our employees stuck in countries that didn't know when or whether they would be able to return. We have a whole bunch of other employees from all over the world, and so this was a direct impact on our ability to do business, and so as a result, we signed on to the amicus brief on immigration to the Supreme Court, basically challenging that executive order. So we're not saying that I'm not saying executives can't take political stances, but they should be related to the business that you're running.
Okay, so how about that limitation, Justin? Can you live with that as a compromise, that CEOs, business leaders can take political positions when it comes directly out of their business issues? That is, if it affects your company, you've got a platform. Otherwise, you should probably keep your views to yourself.
So this is a debate, so I just feel duty-bound to disagree, honestly, although I feel
yeah, the goal is not for you to agree.
Right. My goal is not to agree. I think there are going to be things, my sense is in the next couple of years, there are going to be so many things that come up that are so outside of a generational kind of set of norms that we've all gotten used to, that I wouldn't want to limit myself to sort of be unwilling to speak on something that I just believe in. And as long as I can do it in a way that respects my employees, respects people who have an opposite view, and leaves them room to disagree with me, I'd be willing to roll the dice.
I mean, that's what, in practice, CEOs or business leaders usually do look for a justification about how it's affecting their business. But can't you kind of create a pretext to make anything a business issue that way? I mean, climate change, it's a business issue. We want to conduct our business above water, not underwater. Mm-hmm. You know, one way or the other, everything that affects the country you live in, the social climate, people's relations with each other does affect your business.
Sure. I mean, there is a gray area there about, what would be, directly impacting the business and what would not be. But I think that we operate, in gray areas all the time as leaders and have to make those calls. And I still think to think truly about what would impact your customers, your employees, and your shareholders first and foremost would guide you in some of those gray area decisions.
Here's one last one for you, Justin, before we poll the audience again. But don't you object a lot of the time when you see corporations using their corporate power to intervene in politics on their own behalf whether it's pushing for tax changes that favor them or to discredit evidence around climate change. I mean, there's one model of a corporation like yours and Amy's that might be the enlightened startup, but there are industrial companies in the United States that are strongly identified with very conservative views that are intervening, funneling money to candidates as part of what they do.
No, look, you're making a great point, and honestly, the points Amy's making are really strong, right? You have a fundamental duty to your company, to your investors, to your board, to your stockholders, and you got to be really careful about it. And there are things that offend me personally that I wouldn't say. I don't think you can take a stand that every time something bothers me, I cannot be out speaking about it, because you're running a business and I'm leading an organization. So I do understand what you're saying. There are many, many things that maybe I personally wouldn't agree with, and I'm not going to be out speaking about them that way. You got to pick your battles.
So after hearing this capsule debate, I want to ask you, who is more likely to advise your friend, the startup CEO, not to share his political views than before you started? Put your hands up. Make noise if necessary. I see several hands. And who here thinks is more likely, maybe you are a startup CEO, more likely to get involved in politics quite openly, damn the consequences for your employees? A few more hands, but that's where we started out. That's where we started out too. I want to thank our debaters, Amy and Justin. You guys were both terrific. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. That was kind of fun.